The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We're back. Canna Chat in the Zone. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and I am thrilled on New Year's Eve to have an old friend in a state that is way ahead of California on the eve of legalization. Bill Hall from Oregon. How are you, sir?
I'm splendid, my friend, and how about you?
Well, I'm celebrating something that I've been looking forward to for maybe 30, 40 years.
Oh, yes. It's a big milestone, isn't it?
Legalization of marijuana. And I've always been kind of a scofflaw around that, with no surprise to most of my listening audience. And now that I have the option of being a scofflaw, because it will remain an underground market for marijuana, it's nice to have the choice. Let's put it that way. And it's also nice that some folks are being freed of past offenses, and I put that in quote, around the evil weed, and their records are being expunged here in California. It's really a new age. And I would, Bill, you're a commissioner in Oregon, and
yes.
I would like to ask you, in advance of our legalization this evening at midnight, I would ask you, what was it, since it's been legal in Oregon, what was it that's been good about legalization? What was it that's bad about it from your standpoint? What mistakes did Oregon make that California can keep from making? How is it working out? I guess that's what I want, and that's pretty broad brush. So
sure.
Go at it.
Big picture, but I would say significant upsides, no real downsides. You know, some people who were against it, for instance, are pointing to the fact that more arrests for driving under the influence of marijuana are being recorded by police. But I think the very logical counter-argument for that now is if police stop somebody under the influence who is driving erratically, they say they're much more likely to admit it, since it is, you know, rather than trying to claim that they were under the influence of alcohol or prescription drugs, since it's now a legal substance. I don't know. One of my basic beliefs, and I don't know if everybody would share it or not, but cannabis, much like alcohol, I think it should be and finally is becoming a legal product for adults. I think probably 90% or more of the adult population can enjoy both substances in a recreational way responsibly. There are going to be a minority in any group who will abuse it by doing things like driving when they shouldn't, but really the whole mechanism of prohibition since the 1930s has been so ridiculous, so ill thought out, that I think wiping the slate clean and going the direction we're going is just really the only rational thing to do.
Okay. Now, with legalization comes a certain amount of control,
yes,
which costs money. Let's put it that way. And there's the taxing and this, that, and the other thing. I think there are two things that come from legalization that I think are excellent.
Yes.
Number one is the testing of the drugs. Here in California, they have what's sold is lab tested, and I think that's terrific. And the second thing is the reminder of what you touched on is that driving under the influence, be it alcohol, be it marijuana, be it anything, prescription drugs, being tired,
Yes.
that can cause you erratic driving, and
Being distracted by a cell phone. Yeah.
absolutely, or not having a cell phone. Not being able to find the cell phone while you're driving, and the kid is in the back seat, and you're trying to attend to this, that, and the other thing, and you're stressed and you're rushed. There's all kinds of things that cause erratic driving. But let's not negate the fact that even now it's legal, this, that, and the other thing. What with the increased dosage, if you will, if you put it in medical terms, of THC in today's age of marijuana, as opposed to your grandpa's dope, that kind of thing. Driving under the influence is very dangerous, and that has to be said first and foremost. And I guess if you want to add a third thing to the list, it would be minors subjected to pot. And they're already subjected to pot. The way I look at it, their parents have been smoking all these years. It just didn't start with the legalization. And it comes from communicating with your child what's good and what's bad, and talking about excess and too much. But, you know, as a good rule of thumb, if the kid is under 18, kid really shouldn't be smoking dope. Your brain is forming. It's best, and I'll say this as a personal wake and baker, I wish, looking back, that there was never a reason for me to change my consciousness. But you know what? You grow up in the world that it is, and you see things as they are. Sometimes you need to change your consciousness. And if you're going to do it for me with no hangover, no ill effects, no side effects, not that I started smoking for the medicinal aspect of it, had no idea that it was good for one medically. I knew it was good for one mentally right from the start. But I didn't put two and two together that good mental health affects physical health along your lifetime. So I was blessed with a drug that put me in line with sane people, if you will, mentally, and by a pure accident, it turned out that the effects of smoking an awful lot of cannabis, the effects medically proved to be good over the lifetime. I will never have glaucoma, Bill Hall.
Excellent. Can I get back to one of your questions in the beginning? And I don't know where I think Oregon has made a mistake, and they're in terms of managing all of this. And I don't know if California is going down that route. Oregon is talking about fixing it, but they have put medical marijuana under the Oregon Health Authority's management and recreational under the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. And first, I think from a bureaucratic standpoint, that's just kind of wasteful and duplicative. And also, the OLCC is putting much tighter controls on the, I guess, seed to sale tracking of the product than OHA is doing. And so a lot of people in the medical community are very defensive about claims that essentially they are producing far more product than the medical users alone can observe or can consume, and that they have become the major source of black market marijuana in Oregon today. And I've heard that claim raised in other states where both medical and recreational product are legal. I think it just all should be under one umbrella for consistency's sake.
That's a very, very good point. And what is the tax rate in Oregon if I were living there and went in to buy an ounce of weed and I was going to spend, say, I guess at a club it would be $250, whereas the black market would be $150. Just the rule of thumb.
Okay, well, in Oregon, there is no tax on medicinal product if you obtain a physician's card saying that you meet one of the many qualifying health conditions to qualify for a card. No tax at all, but in most places for the recreational product, it's a 20% tax. 17% of that goes back to the state of Oregon, both to provide the cost of managing the program, as well as some of it is tied into health and education programs and, educational campaigns like that. Those underage should not consume, exactly what you were saying. And then 3% goes back to the local jurisdiction, the city or the county.
Oh, okay. It's not an individual tax. It's not two or three different taxes, city,
right,
state. It's all one tax.
Yeah, it's collected as one, and then the states return, the state collects the entire 20% at the time of sale, but then passes 3% of it back to the local community.
Gotcha. So I'm going to invite some of the local folks in California to listen to your words and compare taxes that you guys are doing quite well receiving. I mean, let's face it, it's been a windfall for Oregon, and that's one of the reasons, and Washington as well, and I think that's one of the reasons why California so readily approved it.
Sure, although another interesting experience, that I've had to do, as a county commissioner, a little bit of tamping down of expectations on the part of the public. We recently finally got our first check for that local 3% share, and it actually represented something like a year's time, and we're going to get quarterly payments after this. And it was just over $100,000 for a county of 45,000 people. But people see headlines like in the statewide media saying, Oregon collects $52 million in marijuana taxes, and they think with our local share, we're going to fix the schools, fix the roads, solve all our problems. Now, I want to say that yes, indeed, $100,000 is real money, but maybe that's going to put another person or two to work in a health clinic, or maybe hire another dispatcher in the 911 center. But the public's expectation.
You can increase those numbers tenfold by putting an marijuana educational program in to alleviate people's fear of smoking and to compare it to alcohol, for instance, and start advertising. There's a lot of things you can do to increase it now that it's legal. And
and I think and I think there are some people who are starting to think that way. A couple approached me that were going to be applying for rezoning some property in the, I'm going to say, I'm sitting right here within about a half a mile of the Pacific Ocean. I can literally go out in my yard and get a nice distant peek of the ocean on a clear day. But this county extends inland, about 35 miles. And on the eastern edge, this old property that once was forest land and more recently is a wrestling camp, this couple, their son and daughter-in-law, they want to open up, it'll be about a 70-acre organic marijuana farm, because what they're already predicting, and I've heard other people say, just like in so many other businesses, you're going to see the mom and pops start to be squeezed out. So they're going to be aiming for a niche market, to grow completely organically outdoors, as natural a product as possible, to go far beyond even the state testing standards. There's one house on the property now. They'll live in that initially, but when they can, they want to build another house and turn the current house into a tasting room. I said, wow, just like a boutique winery. And I thought, well, why not? Again, this is all legal, and if it can bring some business, create some jobs in the county. I mean, the heaviest concentration of growing really is southern Oregon. The county's just north of the California border. They seem to be ground zero. The weather and soil conditions are ideal, and I've heard that a whole mobile crew of bud tenders, that's the name they've been given, have sprung up, who are working in the fields full time, are harvesting buds.
Oh, wow. Well, that's kind of nice. I'll ask you about the scare of the feds. Has that come into play?
It has, actually. With the State Association of Counties, our legal counsel, along with some people from the state legislature, early in the year, did have a visits from some people with the U.S. Department of Justice. And
in the name of Mr. Sessions?
Yeah, in the name of Mr. Sessions, not Mr. Sessions himself, but his representatives. And it's interesting. Well, like so much that's happening with this administration, I think the bluster and bark often is worse than the bite, though they are doing damage. But, they made it clear that they wanted to really see how we were tracking how the system was set up. And, they choose their words very carefully, but everybody walked away from the meeting saying that medical is definitely safe, and the feeling is they're going to bluster a bit publicly about recreational, but they're not going to take it on. They're too smart to know that the blowback would be far worse than any gain they would gain politically by, trying to do that. And I think especially California has got to be the tipping point with it going legal in California. Well, another thing I'm sure you're aware of, and people in the business hopefully will be aware of, that one of the, I think, totally unfounded fears is that grow sites or dispensaries would bring new waves of crime. And
that has been so proven false.
Exactly. And unfortunately, there was one. Yeah, there was one. Yeah, there was one Southern Oregon grower who I believe somebody broke into his home. They had been watching him, and he just finished his work in the fields for the day, and they pretty badly beat him up, and they stole a large amount of cash from him. But that is the problem, and that is the only thing that I can see that invites crime, is unfortunately, because of the continuing prohibition at the federal level, is that this is a business that has to operate on a cash basis. Create some kind of mechanism where the banks can accept this money, and boom, you've taken away 99% of the incentive for crime.
Absolutely, where you can make direct deposits and you could
Yep.
people's payment for it at dispensaries on their cards. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't have, I mean, because other than buying pot or weed, cannabis,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to call it, what do people spend? Where do their cash? Why do they need cash? You don't pay your
Yeah.
mortgage in cash. You don't pay your car payment in cash. You don't even pay your grocery payments in cash. But, you know, previous to legalization, people had no choice but to pay cash.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to still have to pay cash. California and in Oregon. So
Yep.
that's not going to end.
Plus Washington and Colorado. Yep.
Right. Right.
Yep.
Are you in communication with those other states to see how things are working for them? And do you exchange information? And
I think that's happening more at the state legislature level as opposed to the local government, county, and city level. But I do hear, some reports, and I get the impression, Nevada as well is on board. Yeah, once again, the left coast leads the country. But, I'm hearing similar things that, the sky has not fallen, that pizza sales have not quintupled, or that people have not stopped going to work. By the way, I met a man who I think has a brilliant marketing idea, but he's not going to follow through on it, and maybe one of your friends will take him up on this. He said, the perfect business under one roof, two businesses under one roof, a cannabis store and a pizza parlor, and he wanted to call it Pizza Joint.
Oh.
Yeah.
That isn't a bad idea. I don't know if you know, Bill, that my great-great-grandparents combined businesses in much the same way. This was in Minsk, and my great-grandfather was a grower, a marijuana grower in Minsk. And you couldn't grow much.
Wow.
He had one little pot in those days.
Mm-hmm.
But he grew marijuana. And his wife was a woman by the name of Sarah Kregachinsky. And they combined things. She ran a diet clinic. I don't know if Jenny Craig diet clinic started back then.
Wow.
And my grandfather would get people high. They'd eat. They'd get the munchies. And they'd go to her for diet counseling. So it worked, and it worked pretty well. And she had a patented way of getting people to either lose weight or not lose weight. She'd put them in front of a mirror, have them undress, and she'd say, "Look at the size of you. Stop eating so much." And half the people would just think, "Yeah, wow, look at this." And the other half wouldn't, just like today. The same statistics in Jenny Craig today, all those years later.
Wow.
So see where you're coming from. You can get two businesses in one. And he turned out to be the original Zigzag Man.
Wow. Wow. Did not know that family history. That's fascinating.
Isn't it, Bill?
It is. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Ralph, I love it.
All right. Jenny Craig and the Zigzag Man combining businesses. And there you go. So, Bill,
yes.
What are you doing this winter to fix your baseball Jones? When baseball...
Reading and writing about the Brooklyn Dodgers. Still tinkering with my novel, which I would say is probably 3/4 of the way done. For people who haven't stumbled across us talking about it before, it's called Ebbets Field Forever, and it's set in a different world where Walter O'Malley did not gain control of the Dodgers and instead The Kennedy family did, and they end up staying in Brooklyn, and not only does that change baseball and the Brooklyn Dodgers for the better, but the whole country takes a different and I think largely better political course as well.
Well, looking back at my knowledge of history, the two people that you must write about in your book, Walter O'Malley, and if you're talking about the Kennedys, Joe Kennedy was running things. I think Joe Kennedy and Walter O'Malley shared a lot of the same traits.
Oh yes.
Do you agree?
Oh,
they
totally.
Very close. Two
and one
that ever lived.
Yes, and at the climactic showdown meeting where Kennedy essentially, no pun intended here, but plays his trump card and tells O'Malley he no longer has any say in running the Dodgers and go away. O'Malley slowly closes up his briefcase, walks to the door, looks at Joe Kennedy and says, "This is a hell of a way to treat a fellow Irishman," and walks out.
Wow.
But I think that Joe Kennedy was what Walter O'Malley wanted to be, and Walter O'Malley on a much smaller scale operated like that in terms of being.
But both could affect people in a myriad of different ways.
Oh yes, for good and bad. As much as
we
I
got to talk a little baseball on Canna Chat, because I have a contention that the vast majority of baseball fans smoke a little weed now and again.
That doesn't surprise me, because I think most weed smokers I know are more peaceful people. I talked to a friend this past summer at a New York Mets game, and we were talking about the differences between baseball and football fans, and he said, he loved baseball as a young man, turned away from it, and became, immensely attracted to football for a few years and was deeply into it, but then he just kind of lost the passion for football and has returned to baseball, and he said it took him a while to realize it, but he said he is much less angry and aggressive in his entire life. It's changed his world outlook because, for a conservative, I really like George Will, especially because he says Donald Trump is the worst president we've ever had, and he's finally left the Republican Party. But George Will once, who is a passionate baseball fan, by the way, once said that football embodies the two of the worst trends in American life: violence and committee meetings.
That's very well put. He wrote a wonderful book, Men in Baseball.
Yes.
And I don't often agree with him politically, but these days he's becoming a middle-of-the-roader. What's very sad is that the middle of the road is just to the right of Attila the Hun. So
exactly.
Ordinarily, a smart thinker would be you go towards the middle because you can see both sides.
Yep.
But Trump has taken it, and it's not just Trump. It's Ryan and Pence and all these people.
Oh yes.
They've taken it from the ridiculous to the sublime, or whatever the hell the expression is.
Yep.
And
totally.
It's quite scary. So I will invite you to lean back, take a toke, enjoy your morning, and thank you for gracing the microphone. I appreciate this very much. The microphones of Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. It's the Canna Chat in the Zone show. I'm Ralph Zig Tyko. The guest has been Bill Hall from Oregon. Thanks, Big Bill.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year.
Well, you come back and we'll talk again, huh?
Anytime, any topic. I love being in the zone.
Thanks, Bill. Love hearing it. Adios,
Okay,
everybody. We'll be back next week, same time, same bat channel. Adios.